But fundamentally, it's about size and dollars. And we just want to be able to convince you all that at the new site, at this square footage, it could really turn out to be a wonderful benefit to the town. The most significant, of course, is that this is a school that was conceived 30, 40, 50 years ago or so over time, and that is just a fundamental hindrance on the proper functioning of the site, on the safety of the site, on one's access in and around it. Another deficiency is a buildable area. There's been an accretion of additions over many decades. Each one was really done just in response to the one done previously. There's very little order or logic to the internal organization of the building at this point. Were the state to look at this school, take the total square footage which is devoted to educational functions, excluding any maintenance areas, the calculation that they would use on a square foot basis would tell you that it's a school for 860 kids. That's borne out by the fact that if you look at the numbers on the lockers, they go up to 900 and beyond. And there's significant downsides to that in obvious ways in terms of operating costs, maintenance costs. The site of the Clinton nurseries. Starting with vehicular access, there's a broad street frontage here that makes it possible to enter in multiple locations. There is a secondary entrance at the northern end of the site, which provides a place for essentially the public access to athletic facilities, to gymnasium. So one of the really extraordinary opportunities that this site provides for us, unique to the site, is the fact that you see the corner right at the top here. That is the corner of Peters Field. So we have direct pedestrian access without having to involve any motor vehicles at all. We have a pretty good feeling that we can support two soccer/lacrosse fields, a baseball diamond, a separate softball diamond, 6 tennis courts, and a football practice field. Our principal goal in this design was to make this the most efficient envelope that we could possibly imagine. We really took that as our charge here. The most materially efficient, energy conserving building as we could possibly imagine, and do it in a way that utilizes a number of passive technologies and may benefit from higher technology features should those make economic sense. But fundamentally, it's about smart planning, set up like computer rooms, places that are really more consistent with a modern idea about a library in the sense that they're sort of less about books and more about technology. For those of us who are sentimental about books, and I count myself amongst them, there are open stacks and they're out in this area, that these are all sympathetically just working towards the whole education of the student. So coming from the science rooms, there's a greenhouse located right here, and this is now open to the sky. A very durable, a very highly insulated perimeter at this level, super insulated perhaps. So we're envisioning, again, in the interest of real simplicity and of the most compact plan as we can, and where they can shed water from the perimeter walls. You have a fundamental infrastructure here that supports the subsequent installation of the solar system. But in any case, there are 3 very long banks here, again, at precise orientation to maximize solar gain. So the first question in your mind might be, well, so what are we giving up here? We have 158,000 square feet. How are we getting down to 135 without sacrificing something? By the use of logical planning, we can take care of 10,000 square feet of that right out of the gate. So in terms of usable area, whereas that's the graphic illustrating the footprint of the existing building and this is the new, that's what it looks like when one just takes the accumulated usable area of the 2 schools in comparison to. There was really overwhelming consensus during the design process about the need to have an oversized auditorium. So the state has a rule. They will reimburse you for an auditorium that accommodates 1/2 the enrollment of the school, 300 seats, as compared to the 700 plus that you have today. And the community was really of a singular mind here in saying that, yeah, we hear you, but that auditorium is really important to the life of the town. There are really important events that happen there, and it was really seen as critical to this process that we give you a so-called oversized auditorium. So here's the footprint of the existing auditorium. the house area and the stage. Here's the footprint of our proposed auditorium, which I want to qualify and say it is the house, the stage, and the scene shop. And what you don't have today, you don't have a place where you make sets, you don't have a place to store sets. It's a significant problem. Your fire marshal is greatly concerned about it, has raised the issue a number of times when he sees things that he takes exception to. We need to provide that scene shop. So we feel our responsibility is to include that. Square foot per square foot, we're matched up here. So your two-part gym looks like this. Set up in normal day in, day out kind of practice arrangement. A partition system is provided in a closed arrangement here. There's sufficient space for a regulation-sized high school basketball court with enough space around the perimeter for a singular bench, so you can get 50 or 100 people in here for events that are perhaps of less public interest. One can retract that partition. There are lines painted on the floor to make it possible to reorient the gym, nets come down from above, reorient the court in such a way that you now have a substantial perimeter area. So now, for special events, you've got something that's 13,700 square feet, not including the area of the cafeteria and the perimeter corridor area that serve as balconies for viewing events that are occurring down below. Cafeteria, not much to talk about. The space we're in right now, 4,670. Our articles are 4,690. They're essentially the same. The classrooms in this school vary in size significantly. There have been a number of comments from your staff and teachers about wanting dedicated storage space and some thoughts about shared office space and different ways in which the classrooms can be staffed. So at present, we're devoting some of that square footage to dedicated storage space, shared office space, places for two faculty members to collaborate, to meet with a student. Again, this is here primarily to put your mind at ease that reduction in square footage is not being taken out of the usable gross area of each class. The traditional way of expanding on school is to expand out laterally. And that means disruption of the site, changing the site features, parking lots. It often means mobile units or trailers and that kind of thing, modular units that are clipped onto the perimeter of the building. They're never a happy marriage. We would propose that as part of the initial design, we oversize footings, and we oversize steel columns in certain locations. We don't build anything more than that, but we provide the necessary structural infrastructure to support expansion into an attic space at a later time. Our virtual tower is essentially taking a wall. This is actually one of the outboard walls of the auditorium, carving a niche in it, lining it with stone, taking the original stone plaque that exists out here, taking the bell that exists out here, featuring it in the courtyard, making something special that really you can appreciate at eye level, down low, every day as you come to go out of school. To acquire a piece of property which is really quite extraordinary. It's available today. It may not be available next year or 2 years or 3 years from now. If it were, who knows what the price tag would be. So that's an opportunity which presented itself. It's on the table now. There's no guarantees it will be on the table in the future. We're in an environment of record bond rates. The cost of borrowing money is as low as it's been in practically the history of the country. That situation may not be with us in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. Although we're on the backside of it, we're still dealing with a pretty motivated construction industry right now. The bidding environment is still favorable, but the trend is going in the other direction, so the likelihood is delaying 2, 3, 4 years will only add to the cost. And then finally, if you were to stay here, there's just some work that has to be done. The roof replacement is the $4 million that's been shared, and there's code compliance work that needs to be done. When that money is invested, that was what would be several $1 million into this school, that money is on the books. You'll get support from the state on that. That reimbursement will be treated as a disbursement to the town of Clinton. And should you change your mind a few years from now and decide this isn't working, we need to consider a new school. When this building gets torn down, then there's a clawback. The state says, well, not so fast. We gave you X number of $1 million for this, but you didn't carry it through for 20 years. So they start to prorate that, and it starts to impact your return.
This estimate presumes that the design will commence this year, 2012, pending referendum approval. And there is in it escalation for 2 years with a construction start the first quarter of 2014. That 1 year savings is about $1.7 million in the bottom line cost. Within this estimate are 3 different contingencies. There's something called a design contingency. There's a construction contingency that belongs to the construction manager once he put a shovel in the ground, so he has a contingency to work with if there are things that happen, for instance, extra rock excavation, which costs a little more to put the foundation into the ground. And lastly, there's an owner contingency on the bottom line, and in this estimate, that's $3 million. So the aggregate of those 3 contingencies is about $7.5 million, so there's buffer in the estimate. The estimate includes property purchases that you heard about, moving all of the hoop houses off of the property. It includes all of the soft costs, all of the architect's cost to design the building, all of his sub-consulting engineers, and it includes all of the hard costs to build the building. It includes the extension of utilities, bringing water in from where it is now, bringing gas up Route 81 to bring those utilities onto the property. It includes all the FF&E, which is short for fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. The tables, chairs, that's everything that is what would be considered loose equipment inside the building. Lastly, it includes the building of the athletic fields, which you saw at the top of David's site plan. It even includes moving the population from this building to the new building when it's ready to open. Clinton's current reimbursement rate is 36%. So that $64 million divides out to be $19.1 million from the state, and $45.6 million will be paid by the town of Clinton.
At a 4%, it's going to cost the average person about 8.7% over that 20-year period.
It's going to be the same impact every year, so it's not an increment. If you're paying $10,000 or $1,000 in taxes today, it's going to increase you to $1,087. That $87 change is going to be a 20-year. It's going to go into 20 years. So you're going to try to finance as much as possible up front because you want to fix it. If you look at those numbers going across and you look at how much it really costs in additional interest, you see at today's rates, and I don't want to use today's rates, over a 20-year period, it's $12 million of interest at 2.75%. But using a more conservative rate, like 4%, increase an extra $6 million of cost to the citizens. So that's one reason when you really want to fix the rates as soon as possible. It's very competitive.
Thank everybody for coming tonight. Excuse my appearance. We just played 6 games of basketball against a bunch of 8th graders. So the number to use would be $383,000, $768 in tax revenue on the existing property on an annual basis. That's on the building itself. It's not the land. Now we get to the land. We add an appraised value of $5 million. We take that 70% of that, and we're generating at the current mill rate $87,000 a year in annual tax, in a tax basis from that. In 30 years, this will generate $9,171,000 in tax revenue to the town of Clinton. Sale of this property and future development. That's again a low estimate on the building. And if you take the high end of it, it's a little bit bigger building, town is a little better, assessments are higher. Potentially, you could generate up to $25 million in tax revenue over a 30-year period. Right now, $1.5 million in increased spending is a mill increase on your tax rate. Okay. So you're going to knock a third off of that on an annual basis, just with the revenue from the property. We have the potential for a huge offset. And again, as Selectman Giannotti, who's also a member of the building committee, said at our meeting a couple weeks ago, this is the most valuable piece of commercial property in the town of Clinton, and probably in the area because of where it is in proximity to the highway and the potential for future development because of what's around it. So this is something you need to consider when you go to the polls.
Let me finish this presentation by saying that the prospect of relocating and building a new facility for the Morgan School presents an exceptionally rare opportunity for the town of Clinton. Without question, the decision before our town will be talked about for decades to come, and lying before us is the opportunity to overhaul the educational environment of our flagship school, and we'll be able to do it without educational interruption and offset the project's cost with the sale and revenue generated from a property adjacent to Shoreline's premier shopping destination. 5 years after the American Civil War, Charles Morgan, with a gift to our town, established and endowed the school, ultimately bearing his name. Not only was it a gift of hope and opportunity, it was a statement of what he thought to be perhaps the greatest asset he could give his hometown: a proper home to educate his youth. Here we are, close to 150 years later, and circumstances over the past 60 years have required the town to add pieces to our secondary school to serve our needs. The result is a sprawling conglomerate of these 60 years of circumstance fused together into an incoherent design. Today, we are left with a hallway-heavy maze of classrooms. It has 26 separate roof lines, never meant for longevity in a New England climate. It contains many expensive renovating pitfalls, and if we were to assume all these risks and pay to eliminate them, we would still be left with merely a renovated version of the same inefficient design. The building's California design, which was popular in the 50s, was conceived and built in an era which didn't require the consideration of energy costs in New England, never mind a $5 a gallon environment. Ultimately, the building committee's argument for renovation hinged on one single dimension: that it might be cheaper. The town study has shown that even that isn't true if you consider a reasonable sale price for this property that we're sitting on. And worse, we would cut ourselves off from any additional long-term tax revenue to ease the cost. In sinking more money into this structure, quite simply, we risk spending more, maintaining more, and getting less. Our town has one of the most storied educational traditions in the country. Our grade 4-5 school, Abraham Pearson, is named after the first rector and instructor of the very first classes of Yale, held right here at the Congregational Church Parsonage on our main street in 1701. Fittingly, Yale and Morgan share the colors of that church, blue and white. The conceptual design process, approved 10-1 by attendees at a town meeting last March, is meant to give us a cost estimate of the type of structure we need to overcome the shortcomings of our current building. Many Clinton residents have participated in community input events, and what was shared was included in our cost estimate with efficiency and reason. The price is for a building designed for us. It is a coherent design with little wasted space, superior functionality to the current building, a warm, rich learning environment, and designed to bring cohesiveness to the Morgan community. While the number of classrooms, labs, instructional spaces, and core elements to educate our students for the 21st century were given the first consideration, the feedback from the town reveals two program items that for us are cultural necessities. The first, the town of Clinton has heavy participation in sports, and the Morgan School has a rich tradition of success and championships. Included in this cost is a 2-gym layout, but in addition to what we have now, a new building would free us from our current fixed cinder block wall design. The new location will also save us money, as many teams will no longer require busing to the Peters Complex for practices, and the chosen property has significantly more field space. The second cultural necessity is the great value we place on and pride we take in our music, choral, and theater programs. This cost estimate includes a full-size auditorium with a proscenium stage opening to which we are all accustomed, and as noted earlier, the addition of an adequate space for set construction. A new building will provide us with greater functionality in both these highly valued spaces. We should all be proud of the unique qualities, history, and traditions of the Morgan School. And the Morgan School deserves a building that reflects its school and town traditions. So after 2.5 years of study, the building committee has overwhelmingly recommended that we give the town a solution that is less expensive and yields the greatest results. Relocating and building a new Morgan is not only the most cost-effective solution, but may prove to be one of the proudest moments in Morgan school history. I hope each of you considers the historic magnitude of this opportunity for Clinton and the tremendous benefits of this project for the town. Thank you all for coming tonight. And now it's over.